welcome to the first episode of PGS All-Stars. I'm your host, RM. PGS All-Stars is a show that features you, members of the Post-Geek Singularity. On today's show, we have two guests, both well-known PGS members, moderators, and contributors to the Burnettwork. We're going to be talking to them about what they love about Masters of the Universe. Welcome TheRichard and Bunyon Snipe to the show. Welcome to the show, TheRichard.
Hello, hi everybody.
And Bunyon Snipe, Tony.
Hello.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to the program.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start off today's program by learning more about each of you. As you know, I created the show so that other PGS members could get to know everybody in the network. And I want to start with you, TheRichard. I want to know more about your background and find out more about you. Now, can you please tell me if you happen to have a background in entertainment or the arts?
Very much so. I would say my entire life has been devoted to entertainment and especially art. From art classes, president of the art guild in school, designing games since I was 10 years old. I've worked in radio and advertising, marketing, publicity director for Scriptwriter's Place in Hollywood. I've got a long history. Everything I do is wrapped around art and film and my passion for it.
Okay, wonderful. That's wonderful. And how about yourself, Tony? Do you happen to have a background in the arts? And if not, please tell us what your background is.
I do. I studied performing arts at college. I went through a bit of a soul searching period. Wasn't sure what I really wanted to do when I left college, and I kind of sort of fell into a sort of career of customer service jobs, really. So it was just one of those things that kind of, and I've always been sort of in fandom, and but I've never really, I've been parts of communities before, but never in the way that I am, involved with the PGS.
Mm-hmm. And TheRichard, how long have you been a member of the PGS?
Oh God, how long is a piece of string? I believe it's 4 years now.
Wow, that's a long time. And how did you become a member of the PGS?
The simplest answer is I watched a lot of other shows, and I stumbled upon the captain on the Schmodown and thought he was an interesting character. Realized that he was played by Robert Meyer Burnett, and around that same time found John Campia, and I just started watching everybody and followed Robert down the Robert Trail, and realized that I loved his energy. I loved everything about his presentation, his knowledge, the way that he could pull people in. I felt that it was very compassionate and very much along the vibes, the energies of what I'm looking for, always have been looking for. And we started talking, became friends, and here we are.
That's wonderful. And how about you, Tony?
Well, I mean, I saw Free Enterprise way back in the VHS days. Something that Rob would probably not be happy about. And then there was a huge gap. So I saw Free Enterprise. There was a huge gap, and then I saw him appear on AMC Heroes, and and then a few years later, all this kind of just started,
Mm-hmm. Now, you both mentioned that you are both heavily involved in the arts. Do either of you also create artwork or paintings or things of that nature? TheRichard, do you do that sort of thing?
Very much so. Yes, I go through phases actually. Say for example, in 2013 to 2014, I was very much into toy dioramas. I just closed my collectible shop and was bedridden for a little bit, so I ended up taking about 6,000 photos of my toys. And then in 2016 to 2018, I really got into painting again, like I used to do when I was a kid, though this time on a massive scale. As you can kind of see behind me, and we'll share some later on, I do full movie poster size images from all kinds of movies, television, animation, etc. So yeah, I love to paint, sculpt, photography. I've done some nude dancing in the past, all kinds of stuff.
Well, that's wonderful. How about you, Tony?
Well, obviously the new dancing, lots of that. I don't have specifics, but it's definitely on my resume. Kind of, it's one of these things where I was at college, and out of necessity, because we did a theatre course, and we would be doing all sorts of stuff. We did we did set design, we did prop design, we built our own props, we and did stuff like that. So you're kind of pushed into a corner. And I remember the first thing I did, I was in a Terry Pratchett play. I played Cutwell, and one of my ideas was that I would put a bucket on my head. When I took the bucket off, there'd be a lobster attached to my nose, and I went through this whole thing of building a lobster based around a clothes pin, a clothes peg, and that would attach to my nose. And eventually, we just kind of and I got like 3/4 the way through it, and they went, "Yeah, this isn't working." So it was. You know, that was kind of the first time I really had experience doing something, building something that was going to be used for something, and then kind of didn't. But it was a really good experience. But I mean, but before then, I was always drawing. I always kind of wanted to be in comics. You know, when you're a kid, you go, "Oh, I really want to be in comics," and I would go. So I went through that thing where you write into 2000 AD or Marvel UK and stuff like that, and you go, how do you get into comics? And it's like, well, you go right. It depends what you want to do in comics, because it's a huge field. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be on the creative side. You can be in administration. You can do all sorts of things, and you know, and yeah, that was the thing. And but I realized that I was okay at drawing stuff. I was terrible at perspective. I could never understand perspective until, you know, relatively recently, like less than maybe a little bit more, say 15 years ago. It really kind of a little switch turned in my brain, and all of a sudden I understood perspective. But yeah, it's one of those weird things where it was, but also, you know, I'm terrible with deadlines, so I'm very much in the Douglas Adams school of deadlines, where you know, the wonderful sound of as the deadline whizzes past. But yeah, so I don't think I have the right attitude of being comics.
But you're a big fan of them.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of the, because you know, we all grew up. You know, we're unfortunately we are all of a certain should we call
Maturity?
What's the term for wine? It's I'd say my vocabulary's got worse over the years.
We're nerds, we're geeks, we're passionate.
We've aged like a fine wine.
We do. Yeah, it's of a certain vintage. We are of a certain vintage. There you go. See, my brain does work sometimes. We're of a certain vintage. So we all come from a time when, you know, stuff wasn't so easy to come by.
Mm-hmm.
And we, I mean, it's even going back to before videos were that easy to get, you know, and comics were just readily available. They were sold everywhere. And we got, I mean, and I got relatives in the US, so I used to get bundles of American comics all the time, and the reprints that we used to get over here. So it was just readily available and something you could just get into very easily.
Yes, and the comics were affordable. You know, you could buy them for, you know, sometimes less than $1. I mean, and pick up, you know, as many as you wanted. And, you know, it was a great time, you know, during that era. But so that's good to know. And so, of course, my next question to both of you, and I'd like to start with TheRichard, is tell me about how you first became a fan of Masters of the Universe.
I can't recall if it was the toy first for me or the filmation. I do, because it all happened around the same time, and I was 8 years old, I believe. Yeah, and I remember wanting the toy, so I probably was watching the show, and I remember we were traveling somewhere. We stopped by this gas station or whatever. They had He-Man toys. Well, they only had Manny faces, and I was bummed, but I had to get him because I didn't have a He-Man toy, and I'm so glad I did, because Manny faces is by far my favorite now. And I became obsessed with He-Man around the time of the filmation. I got the sticker books, as many of the toys as I could afford, which was not very many, though. As we'll talk about, He-Man as itself is a communal thing. Everybody's got some, and you get to go over to everybody's house and play with them. And you know, somebody's got the castle or the Wind Raider, and you don't have that. It's freaking awesome. And so that my passion just started in the beginning. I just don't remember exactly what my beginning was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been that way.
And how about you, Tony? When did you first become a lover of Masters of the Universe?
So I think it was Christmas of 1982. And every sort of the first or second week of December, we would always go up to the West End of London. We would always go and have a look around. We'd look at the lights and all that stuff. And every year we would go past, we'd go to the Selfridges. So Selfridges would always have the big windows and all their things. And Hamleys, the toy store. And Hamleys had this huge, they'd built all this stuff with foam and coloured sand. And I'm not sure if this is true, because I think it's actually slightly, we actually went up there in November. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that actually got all the Castle Grayskulls in yet. I think maybe they had like I think there were only about a dozen Castle Grayskulls, I think, in the country at the time, and they were expecting this huge delivery for Christmas. And I think we went up there in like the second week of November in that year. So we went up there, and there was a Castle Grey. So you had all this stuff. They set it up. They had like 3 suns up, you know, very Star Wars-esque, and they created this sort of weird sort of purple sky. And they had, on the left-hand side up at the top, they had Castle Grayskull, and they had He-Man and Skeletor fighting, and Beastman, and all the other characters. And it was like, wow, this is amazing. So that's the first, I think that was probably the first time I'd heard of it, and I remember seeing things in comics. I think they had a one page spread in 2000 AD, or I think it might have been Eagle, about it. And and then kind of forgot about it. And then Christmas came round, and my brother got He-Man and Battle Cat, and I got Skeletor, Merman, and Beastman.
Yeah.
That was right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's and the thing, of course, what you get with these toys is the mini comics.
Yes.
And I really got into that. That Alucarda, his artwork was this painted artwork. Let's face it, they were basically pamphlets. You know, they were basically
much smaller than the average size comic.
I mean, and they were basically picture books because they had a picture and then they had text next to it. Right. But it was this amazing, and they created this world, this sort of almost like a caveman, a Sumerian style tribesman who left his home to go out and find himself and ended up in this cave and found this magical harness which gave him these superpowers. But without it, he was just a normal human being, right? But so that's my first. That's really my first. And then the Filmation series came along and kind of radically changed the mythology, brought in Prince Adam, and I kind of went off it. For a while. Mm-hmm. But I was still fascinated. But the toys were still out there. So for me, there were almost two separate continuities. There was the Filmation continuity, and then there was my headcanon, you know. So, yeah.
So then, did the difference in the stories from the comics to, let's say, the Filmation series, is that what you're saying? Kind of made you step away just for a little while because they were just not the same story or concept.
Certainly, the first half dozen mini comics were very different. But as soon as, just before the Filmation show came out, they started to change things, and they brought in Prince Adam and all these other characters, and they started changing the mini comics to fit the TV series.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So eventually they did change, but in my mind, in my heart, we still have that original continuity which I clung to, you know.
Mm-hmm. And TheRichard, what did you think about the mini comics versus the story in the Filmation series? Did you have the same experience as Tony?
I didn't lose any interest. I can tell you that, because growing up only having a few of the figures, you had to play with other toys as well. So the comics, even though they weren't the same as the cartoon, I'm not going to be playing with them the same as in the cartoon. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be coming up with my own stuff anyway. So I totally loved it. Here's an example of the mini comics. Mm-hmm. I chose the Manny Faces one there, and then you could see the older style of the older style was like one image, and this is even after they came up with the more classic costuming, but that's how the original comics were.
Thank you for showing it to us in a larger picture, because I have difficulty seeing some of those smaller prints, and that's great that you have it just blown up so that we can see it. But you can clearly see, just even from the few pictures that you showed us, TheRichard, how beautiful these mini comics were.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. Everything about Masters of the Universe is beautiful. You got to admit that. Even the rough sketches of them are really something special. They were always on to something, and it took them a while to figure out exactly where they were going to go. And yeah, the Filmation, it went in a different direction, though. We wouldn't be talking about them today, likely, if Filmation hadn't have stepped in. So, bravo.
Mm-hmm. That is not untrue. Yeah, you are right there.
Now, from what I've heard, the actual series also was created off of the toy line, or let's say inspired by the toy line. But just in your opinion, do you think that the series reflects what the toy line gave you? You know, in your opinion?
yeah, the series is a gigantic advertisement. Ultimately, I mean, it's fun. The series is absolutely fun. It is for kids. It's got a moral at the end. Nobody gets hurt in the older versions. Um, though they want you to buy the toys, and by God, we did.
Mm-hmm. And, obviously, so many people have seen Masters of the Universe toys, but there are some things about the toys that I think are just beautiful. First of all, that when they decided to make, let's say, He-Man, for example, they really made the figure, just a beautiful man's figure. And, they continued it down the line. So while, all of the male figures may have a very similar physique, they're the same ones, right? It's the same cast, correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so they focused on using beautiful colors in these figures, so that everything was just colored so nicely, and the designs on it just really good looking toys.
This is a newer one, though, and it's lesser quality in a way. I mean, I don't like the sculpt. His body looks fine and everything, but
I actually prefer the newer ones, by the way.
well, no. This is a newer than newer or something. It's one of those like in between. It's not the best of the best. Like your Skeletor is really good.
Yeah.
So, well, tell me, Richard, what do you like about it, and if anything that you dislike, just tell me what on that particular figure that you're showing us.
Well, I love the joints, and all the new ones have the joints, because in the older figures, say,
there was less articulation, right?
Yeah, there's very little articulation. Where are we? Okay, so yeah, you can't bend his elbows, this and that. And this is the one that has a little pop thing in the back of whatever. Right. But as you can see, this guy has knees and everything, toe joints, wrist movement, everything. You could do a lot more with these than you could with these. So I'm really happy with all the new things.
Do you think that, as of course, I'm the same generation as you guys. Do you think as we're getting older, we want more articulation in a lot of these toys than what we had, obviously, as children? We want to be able to do more poses and things like that. I mean, do you think that's important, or do you think that the toy loses anything by having more articulation?
Tony?
I think in terms of Master of the Universe, I think it's great. I think more articulation is great because you can do more with them. I think that was one of the downfalls maybe of the original. I mean, they are. One of the things is that the legs on the old ones had this sort of really finicky rubber thing that went through, like a rubber thong which holds them together. And there you go. And they over time they deteriorate and they make it. And so a lot of people are getting the new toys. There we go, like that. You see, are getting the new toys, and they're because the old vehicles still work perfectly, but the figures themselves are not holding together quite so well. But I've always been a fan of articulation, but sometimes it works. I was a big fan of the old Fisher-Price Adventure people.
Yes,
and they were kind of. I still think they're kind of the perfect toy line, because it's all about your imagination. There was no sort of third party cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon for it. It was, and they had such a variety of stuff. They had cowboys, and they had deep sea divers, and they had rescue teams and police. It was an amazing sort of cross section of stuff, and it really drove the imagination. But you could use those because they were in the same scale as Star Wars or G.I. Joe or the Black Hole, or
right.
There were so many, and the A-Team as well. You could mix and match, and you could kind of create your own little universe that wasn't entirely based on a property, an already existing property. I mean, you could do that if you wanted, but you had complete freedom, and that's what was amazing with it, really.
Yeah, and I'm just curious as well. We're talking about looking. We just had. Thank you, TheRichard, for showing us. An older model of Masters of the Universe toy versus a newer one. In regards to the castle, Grayskull Castle, which is maybe one of the most recognizable toys. Out there. And I do have friends who still have their originals or have picked up an original Grayskull Castle from a garage sale or lucky enough to find that. Has that changed? I guess, as out of curiosity, because I haven't purchased one, but maybe you both would know whether from the original, from the 80s that we remember to are they still producing that toy and has it changed in its details?
They're definitely still making them. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, they I mean, the figure that he showed you just there was part of the Master of the Universe Origins line, which is now they have three. They have three. They currently have three Master of the Universe toy lines in production. Well, they've got two currently in production and one that's coming out soon. So they've got this is Master of the Universe Origins. You've got the Masterverse, which is which at the moment is entirely based on Revelation characters, but they might be sort of spreading out into all different versions of Master of the Universe. Apparently, I'm not entirely sure that's true. And then you've got the other Netflix series that's coming up, which is a CGI show that's more aimed at kids, and that's just called He-Man: The Master of the Universe. So that's three. Plus, they've also got Mega Constructs, which is the sort of Mattel's own sort of Lego knockoff. You've got the mini. They've got ones called the minifigures, which are like a sort of super deformed ones as well, which is sort of more like, and then you've got the and then you've got the ones you get the sort of blind box ones as well. That's and what else is there? Oh yeah, and there's muscles as well. Yeah, it goes on and on into infinity. Really does.
Mm-hmm. And I can see you're both collectors of these, this line, and the quality of the toys look amazing. Even now, 30 years later, still looking at these toys, they still look fantastic. And it is great to see the passion that you two have for Masters of the Universe. And I share that passion too. Unfortunately, I'm not a collector of Masters of the Universe,
well,
but
I'm not really a collector. I mean, I have a few bits and pieces, but I'm not really a collector in general. I'm kind of not particularly precious about stuff. I would be if I had hot toys, I would lose things. I would break them.
Right.
I would be the well. I would not. It would not be a good idea. But yeah, and the great thing about these Origins figures is that you can completely pull them apart, which you couldn't with the original ones because they had that twist punch action. And these you can completely take them apart, which means you could, if fingers crossed, and they decide to sort of release just the bodies in sort of all different colours, you could basically mix and match and create your own characters, which is something that I think would be an amazing sort of revelation.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been into that type of modular toy making. When I was in high school, we had jewelry making stuff, and I realized, I can melt plastic in warm water and sculpt it. So I made my own action figures where you could replace the arms and the heads and weapons and all of this stuff. And of course, they were like monsters with razor blades coming out of their eyeballs and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about the mix and match Masters of the Universe stuff.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for both of you. I hope
Monsters High does that, and I do have some Monsters High. Monsters High, you could swap the body parts out.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and the great thing is, this new line is much, because I mean, there was a line that came out in the aughts called Master of the Universe Classics, and it was a kind of I'd say high end, but it was a higher end collector's line in the sort of same vein as Marvel Legends kind of is now, and but much sort of higher quality than that even.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those figures could go for ridiculous prices, and they made them in very low numbers. So some of them are almost impossible to get your hands on now. But I think this Origins line, the problem is, and this is the problem, because they've got 3 different toy lines out at once, 3 different high-profile toy lines out at once about the same, regarding the same property. And I've got a terrible feeling that they might oversaturate the market, and it might be detrimental to Origins, which is kind of, I find that quite depressing. But fingers crossed that they'll do the right thing, and they'll make this happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you both for joining me for this premiere episode of PGS All-Stars. I so appreciate it, TheRichard and Tony, Bunyon Snipe. And for the viewers, please join us again for the next episode and the continuing series of what we love about Masters of the Universe. In the next episode, we're going to be going over the first episode of Masters of the Universe Revelations. And I hope you can join us. Well, thanks for joining us again on PGS All-Stars and our special series for what we love about Masters of the Universe. Hope to see you again soon. Until then, take care.